Yeah, we're Troilus, unfortunately, so no big wooden horse in the car park that you might be in. Right, so thanks, Thomas, for the introduction of all my BizAv panel introductions. That's certainly my first. Yeah, let me just quickly introduce myself. My name is Ben Edwards. I am JSSI Parts and Leasing's Regional Sales Director for Europe, Middle East, Africa and India. I'm coming up on 20 years in aviation in all its various forms. That's 4 years with my current role, 7 years turning spanners in the military, and I guess at the risk of declaring a bias here, definitely not 9 years working for one of the panelists. So yeah, we're here today to talk about parts issues and logistics and supply chain issues, and I checked my notes earlier, it says there hasn't been any over the last 5 years, so we can knock it off and go for lunch now, I think. No, but if we could go down the line and introduce ourselves, I'll start at the end here with Scott.
I'm Scott Lawson. I'm with HJS. We do aftermarket aircraft part sales, and I guess probably the biggest thing I'm noticing out of today is you're right, there's nothing going on with supply chain. But this marks the 40th year that aviation has put food on my table, and I've seen a lot of different things happen over that time. You can always say that the next year hopefully is more exciting than this year. It just seems to keep on going.
Okay, Paul Sconce from Euravia Engineering. I've been there 7 years. Currently the Managing Director, Accountable Manager, and hopefully sharing some information today, we can all get an understanding of where the aviation industry is going. Particularly, it's very tough, I'm finding it. I think we all are at different levels, quite complicated. But we'll hope not to go too long into the rabbit hole, and we'll see where we are.
Let's lunch at once, we can't go that far.
Good afternoon, can you hear me? Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Simon Greasley. I'm the Managing Director of Allaero. We're based in West Sussex, and we supply business aircraft parts for the range of business aircraft. I've been with Allaero for 28 years. It's 36 years old, and it's a family-owned independent company, now in its third generation, and...
Yeah, so I think we're all aware that there are ongoing issues in the supply chain across the OEMs, across the fleet, across the components. We've had COVID, and then it's been compounded by geopolitical conditions and by raw material supplies and now by trade barriers that have been brought in certain parts of the world. Where do you see, we'll start with you, Scott, but where do you see particular pain points, particular issues, and is there anyone out there, any OEM who is trying hardest to work around them and putting their ducks in a row again?
The pain points. There's a labor shortage, at least a qualified labor shortage with the repair vendors that are supporting the components. There's a component delay in piece parts to support those individual components. You have a lot of manufacturers that appear to have lost a lot of their talent during COVID, and it's hard to recover that talent back. I think we came up with talking in the last panel about the single point of source for individual components. Once you have all your eggs in one basket, it's very hard to get that moving in a different way. For us, what we see is it's caused us to have to put more money in investment in materials, to pre-plan things for the future, to put more money in individual piece parts to help support our vendors that are supporting our repair and our core returns, because they don't necessarily want to make the investment for what they've got, what they see as the market. And as the OEMs, we partner a lot with Bombardier. I have good and bad to say on both sides of that, but on the good side, what I can say is that they've recognized that they can't provide everything, so they are open to looking at alternative sources. They work with us to find qualified aircraft that they would be interested in having parts from, so we have kind of a narrowed focus on what we look for to support them. And they are willing to work with parts that perhaps aren't OEM certified through their network as an alternative source that they can offer out to their customer in an effort to try and keep customer satisfaction going.
Oh.
Okay, so parts are a problem. Okay, they're a big problem for Euravia, particularly for the PT6 Pratt & Whitney engines. The problem that we have is the supply chain can supply parts, but the parts are becoming very expensive. Pratt & Whitney can supply the parts, but they become very expensive. Repairs are becoming very expensive. To give you an understanding of where the engine costs are going, so 2016, the PT6-60A for a King Air 350 was 234,000. On the projections that I've got for 2027, they're going to be $750,000. That's 3 times the value. So it puts the business in a predicament of where do we go and how do we sustain the business, because Euravia are only based on the PT6 platform. So we talk about sustainability. Now, I've got some worries, I really have, about how Euravia can sustain itself when we only support 2-seater to 12-seater aircraft. They're already feeling the pressure, and to a point where we're going to be almost more expensive than the aircraft itself is putting us in a predicament. So I'm currently having very high-level discussions. Andy Brown mentioned some of the things with Allaero. They're in a slight different point of view, heavily entrenched in different aircraft and different platforms, but for Euravia, we're small scale. It's very tough for us, very tough.
Thank you. We all know about the problems with parts supply since COVID, when the foundries have been shut down for the glass and for the rubber. So I'm not going to labour that. What we're finding nowadays is that the OEMs of the actual parts, not of the aircraft manufacturer, but they're monopolising the market, they're swallowing everyone up, and are failing to give out the support for these parts. So L3 is a great example of that. Safran removing parts from their capability, and they leave these issues for the aircraft manufacturer to deal with the customers and the likes of us, trying to say sorry for them all the time. So we have tried contacting these manufacturers to help support them, to remove those parts from their capability and us buy them on. They just won't talk to us. So the way that we try and get around this is much the same as you, buying more stock when you can.
Well, and I was going to say, some of what you were mentioning there, it also follows along with what NJ said before, too, is that new aircraft manufacturers are producing new aircraft, and their suppliers are trying to support that new aircraft, and they have to drop, because they don't have the staff, they have to drop certain capabilities. They just don't have the ability to maintain that anymore. But they also don't necessarily want to hand it off to anybody else, because it's exposure to them that they don't want to have. So they let it lie, and it becomes a difficult party to be a part of with the older aircraft, for sure.
And this brings me on to my next question as well, but I think there's simple things like a mindset change, right? I mean, we've had issues with certain components. You send them into the shop, there's a piece part within that component, it's 180 days, it's a year's lead time. And you say, well, that's fine, I've got 5 more of those in stock. I'll send you 5 more cores, make me 2 good ones. I can't do that. Right. Why not? I mean, this is square one, right? Why not? That's just a process change that could make a difference immediately. So with that in mind, yeah, turn times at repair shops for your unserviceable cores, where can improvements be made here? I mean, for me personally, I think some of the OEMs have to let go, right? Why do I have to send it through you to send it to them, and then talk to you to talk to them, and it just adds a day, in every communication process? Why could you? I mean, you're going to make your cut if I send it direct to them. Why can't I do that? So where do you think improvements can be made in getting these parts in and out of overhaul shops and back on the shelf quick?
I don't know that we're ever going to change what the OEM thinks about how they do things. Honestly, I think the biggest thing that we can do, it comes down to operator pressure, I think, in a lot of cases, because the operator is ultimately the customer that's looking to be satisfied. They have to put some pressure on these OEM shops to help support it if they're going to maintain operating these older aircraft. For us, as parts suppliers, what we start looking at is looking for alternative sources of repair, alternative methods of repair, and then trying to now convince our customer base, who's used to always going one way, that there's actually a potential alternative out there, and that we're willing to back it up and support it with the same warranty, or even better in some cases, coverage than what they were going to get through their OEM. And it's a selling proposition. you know, like Del Rey had mentioned, it doesn't matter where you go in this industry, no matter how big and how technical it gets, a lot of it comes back down to communication and trying to work and move that message along.
Well, we're going to have to find some solutions, that is for sure. What's happening is that with the lack of parts or the increase in prices, we have to find alternatives. There's new startups. There's other distribution networks open up in Europe. You know, so predominantly we are spending 400,000 a year just on moving parts backwards and forwards from the UK to the US. And the parts are moving from 1 month to 2 months to 3 months to 4 months. Not only did it stretch out your lead time to your customer, stretched out the cash flow, stretched out the expectations from internal revenue targets from the corporation team. So everything is put under pressure, and you all know this, being leaders in your own facilities and owners as well. So we're having to look more into Europe. There must be more than 1 or 2 companies in Europe that supply and service parts. Yep. Has to be. You can look at teardowns, your inventory goes up. Where do you need teardowns, need resources? So it's a circulation of a headache that we all feel, how to manage that.
And no one's looking to deregulate or to fit parts that are bogus or spurious, but something Andy alluded to earlier, you know, I service a lot of requests and requirements from APU shops and engine shops because they see our material on the shelf. And we quote them a lot, but they're not going to accept that because it doesn't have an OEM tag. So you have an engine gathering dust in a shop because the OEM can't supply, and I've got the component gathering dust in the warehouse because they can't meet the two together, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with the certification for that part. You can re-inspect it and certify it yourself if you want. I mean, do you have those same issues with the components that you have to approve?
We do, yes, you're right. Now, whether we're being overzealous from inspection, but there is quite a few parts that come in with Form 1s now that we still reject and send them back. Now, I wouldn't say people are cutting corners or whether the inspection process is changing for somebody, but we're rejecting them. And again, that does cause problems. So particularly for CTV rings, blades, all the major parts, you just can't build an engine without that. And if we're rejecting parts from industry, how is industry accepting it? Right. So it does put pressure on us as well.
There's some other things with that too. You know, the rules, there's a discussion earlier about how we manage the regulators, and internal big companies have regulations internally that they change. And I have new parts sitting on the shelf right now that I've bought from the manufacturer that have manufacturing certs that now when I go to sell them back to the manufacturer when they ask for them, they say they can't accept them because the cert doesn't match what their new requirement is. At times you got to wonder how much they want to help the situation. So.
Yes, lunacy. What we're finding in the repair side of things, such as the Honeywell oil coolers, where only Honeywell are approved to overhaul those, we're finding companies coming up with DER repairs in the States, which are now being more and more accepted in the UK, and we're finding a real trend for the PMA alternatives to be accepted in the UK and Europe as well, where traditionally it was frowned upon. Nowadays, fire extinguisher squibs, you name it. There's companies set up out there to produce PMA parts solely for these parts suppliers. We saw it with the windows, with the GKN, and PPG and Lee Aerospace started PMAing these windows to help the supply.
Yeah. And that just becomes, again, part of the selling proposition to explain to people something they weren't considering normal before, that you have to open up your mind to think about other ways, because otherwise you don't want an airplane sitting on the ground for 6 months because you can't get a tire, or you have to think about other ways to work through the situation to get through. I mean, I think we're stuck with it for a long time going forward. I don't see a bright sky heading right up to change everything.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. As we've mentioned, we've had lots of problems going back to the start of COVID. It's been glass, it's been tyres, it's been petrochemicals since the war in Ukraine, it's been underwater locating beacons, it's been everything. How have you tried to balance and manage your inventory and the costs of putting these things on the shelf? Have you gone all out to try and find creative solutions to make sure that you are stocking these hard to find parts? Or have you said, well, I tell you what, there's not enough hours in the day to worry about those. Let's move on, let's stock everything else we can. How are you trying to to balance your inventory to make sure that you can still supply what people need at the right time, but you're not chasing unicorns the whole time?
Well, for us, we're pretty selective. We're kind of a niche market. We've been primarily a Bombardier supporter, mostly Global Express, mostly Challenger 300s. So we stay heavily involved in that. We look for the key components that are causing the struggle. We try not to work in competition with Bombardier, but rather to be a side source to them. They have their market that they're going to support that's always going to go to them, but there's another faction that's looking for alternatives, and that's where we come into. So we pull that group to find out what parts are hurting them and what they're looking for. And the other thing we do now is we're starting to look at, as it was mentioned earlier, you may have an operator or someone who has a lot of inventory and it's growing dust on the shelf. We try to find them and offer them an alternative to let us possibly push that material out into the market, find a solution to them where they can make a little money on the product and somebody else can find a solution. We can get that core back, put it back to this person's shelf, because we can't afford to go out and buy a Global Express just for 2 windshields and 4 main tires. There's a limit to what you can do. So yeah, we try to be selective. There's a few parts, and we just try to keep turning those because, again, we're used to, as a parts broker, we used to sell a lot of things outright. Now we're trying to work things more on exchange because there's not as many choices out there. It's gone once, you never get another one.
Well, I guess it's harder for someone like you from an engine shop because you're not going to go out there and buy every component of an engine in new condition, have 2 or 3 on the shelf, so you've got something to support each overhaul, each failed item. Right? How are you managing that?
Very hard, very hard indeed. Because we're a grey shop, we don't get necessarily supported from Pratt's with the discounts that the DOFs get. You've also got the constraints from inventory management. You've also got resource issues in terms of buying cores and tearing them down and using them for your own engines, which we do. But there is a limit. There is a limit of how many parts you keep on the shelf. And even if we have the parts, we have to send out for repair. So we're restricted from that perspective. When we send them to the repair shops for component repairs or specialist services, we're not going to get them back in a timely manner either because they're busy. And the ones that are busy are extending or they're selling out. So when you're part of a conglomerate as well, you find it even harder to get the services because in some instances it's becoming a faceless service. So yeah, there's a lot of things to balance. It's a very complex topic, and we don't have the time to discuss it all today. But
It's lunch.
yeah, but we have to be selective. So we're focusing on blades, focusing on the hot sections, focusing on CT, PT vane rings, and just trying to be as selective as possible. But even then, on test performance, you get fluctuations, and you may have to open it up, take it out, and replace it with something else. It's all done to the test, and if the floors aren't correct, we've had them back from the OEMs, and they're not correct. So it's an uphill battle sometimes.
And we're much the same as Scott, really. The selective purchasing, where pre-COVID we would go out and part out an aircraft. There's not many aircraft out there anymore, and the aircraft that are out there are very expensive. So we tend to partner with our, in the olden day, competitors, and we purchase stock from each other to make sure it's in the correct locations around the world and servicing everyone's customers. We also do bulk purchase orders with the aircraft OEMs, Textron, Bombardier, the list goes on. That's not the cheapest way to solve the problem, but it solves the problem of spare supply sometimes.
Yeah. No, I agree. Move on to a bit of technology without trying to say the letters AI. We're always trying to make sure that we've got the right inventory on the shelf. We're always trying to forecast demand for certain parts that we can get hold of easily. What technologies are you trying to bring in order to make sure that you've got the right stuff on the shelf at the right time?
What technology? I don't know there's any technology yet that is, AI tries to, but I don't know that there's technology yet that can figure it out. The one thing about business jets versus commercial is business jet operators have very little inventory sitting, and you never know what's going to be the part that's going to break. You can look at MTBURs, and get some understanding. For little guys like me, a lot of it comes down to just the feel of what the client base has done in the past, what they're asking for currently, what they look like they're predicting is going to happen to them. That's where we get a lot of ours, is touch point of real people. I don't know that you're going to solve that with a computer. I don't see that happening. Where we get a lot of our demand forecasting too is we partner up with some big MROs to put inventory on their shelves, so they see airplanes coming in. They know what they're getting and what their demands are bad. They have a bigger picture view than I do. So with that big picture view, they can selectively come back to me and say, these are the kinds of things we'd like to have sitting on our shelf, and that gives me a better understanding of what I need to put into their pool.
Or are you using anything that's helping you forecast your engine inputs and stocking accordingly?
No, not really, no. It's basic CRM management for the business, really, but we've not really looked that far to see how we develop Euravia, per se, into a more parts management company. I've looked into it. It's about the resources, and it's also about how we get the parts repaired, where do we get them repaired. It's logistically difficult to try and change the direction of Euravia. But one thing we do need, and I think it's the same for everybody, you do need diversity, right? You need diversity so that you sustain your business. Because if you have one concept, it's going to be very tough in this current industry, I feel. I was saying to you earlier, wasn't I, that if you just sold wheels, you would stagnate eventually. But because it has a wide variety of parts, you sustain your business.
Yep.
With Euravia being in PT6, there's still scope to progress and still scope to diversify. But there has to be a want as well from either within or within the corporation or from the industry as well, where that goes. So right now we don't have any AR technology or any specific special technology to break the business down and go into different areas.
And I was going to say too, on top of that, because it is such a wide variety of things you get involved in, the aircraft OEM has a pretty good idea, but they won't tell you. They want to hold that information for their own, and I understand that, but I think part of this would be if they could find trusted partners and share some of that information, it would help the overall market. This consolidation that happened, and has been brought up before, this consolidation has done some fine things, but at this point, it's now going the other direction.
Totally agree, Scott. We're all a big aviation family, and we should be there to support each other and not compete against each other. With regards to AI, as a parts stockist, I think a good computer system with planning and forecasting is as much as we can handle at the moment. We use AI within the company for our sales team with Copilot and stuff, and we've got a chatbot on our website which is meant to help you around. But I don't think AI in the parts stockist world is necessarily a good thing. Your side of things with maintenance, I imagine it could help.
Yeah, I mean, across our business units with Traxel, with the programs, with parts and leasing, we obviously are sitting on a huge amount of data on 4,000 aircraft worth of contracts that we're buying parts for, maintenance inputs, we're selling parts, and also Traxel has, data on parts that are most commonly changed on aircraft. And that's fantastic until you look at a list and you say, what's the most commonly replaced parts on a 604? We get two different part numbers for the same wheel, the Meggitt part number, the OEM, two different tyres, 4 different life vests, and then DK120s. Well, that's not told me anything, right? And it's difficult. And you go to an operator and say, well, look, you tell me, right? You tell me what parts caused you problems. And they're thinking about a specific wing panel that they drove into a GSE cart last year and they couldn't get for 6 weeks. Yeah, but you're not going to drive the same panel into another car. I mean, it might be the other one next time. So it sounds easy. It sounds like you tell me everything you sold last year. Well, great. I mean, I sold 1,000 DK120s last year because no one had them. I won't do next year because they're all back on the market now. So I think there is a place for AI to be able to consolidate all this data and make sense of it. But yeah, where we go to with it, I'm not sure, right?
There's a lot of good data sets out there. I think the problem is they're so fractured. Like you said, you have your data set, I have mine, Simon has his. But to make sense of what that all means to everybody is still not, I don't know the solution to that. I don't think there's one yet.
No, I agree. And then once you come up with a list of parts that are best to stock, no one's got them. You can't buy them. You can't buy them.
No.
Last question then, and then it will be lunch. I keep mentioning it as my area of expertise. We've talked a bit about collaboration. We've talked a bit about OEMs. Obviously, if we all look back 6 years, there's a lot of standoffishness between OEMs and third-party part suppliers. We are all trying to support a finite number of aircraft. The better those aircraft are supported, the more people that are going to come into the industry and the more parts we can all sell. We have seen like a lowering of the barricades, I think, over the last few years, a lot more collaboration between the OEMs and between third-party part suppliers so that they can support people and we can support people with their parts. Do you see that continuing in fairer weather, right? If we've got fair tailwinds in the industry, do you think that the OEMs are going to say, well, look, we've divested this issue here and this one here. Let's continue that way. Let's continue with this support network, or do you think it'll all get bought back in-house?
I hope so. I hope that continues. I've always been a small business guy. I've always believed in partnering with other small business folks because I can't provide everything to everybody, and I'm not going to try to do it, but I know that Simon has things available that I don't have, and we can share inventories back and forth to do things. We can support OEMs that way. If the OEM shares, we can share. There's all kinds of things we can do. My concern is that will happen is that some of this pressure will die off, and what you'll see is the larger companies, and you see it already, the larger companies saying, I'm being pressured to have this support. And Simon does a very good job with Allaero, so let's gobble up Allaero and let's bring it into the fold. Let's bring it into the fold. And then what you end up is back to one monolith that has a level of bureaucracy that now doesn't support as efficiently as it did before. So for myself, I'm trying to keep it to where we make relationships and work on a small scale so that Allaeros of the world, folks like that, don't have to look at going somewhere else because they're doing just fine where they are. And as long as we can keep these airplanes flying, that's all that matters to me.
Yeah, I think we've got to find a way, not just us, it was Euravia, but everybody needs to find a collaborative partner. Diversity, again, is what I'm saying. You need to look at how you separate your business into different areas to safeguard your future. We're talking with Pratt & Whitney at the moment to see how we can collaborate with them for long-term longevity on different programs away from the PT6, just so that we retain some sovereignty as Euravia as well, and how that may look. We have a facility in Phoenix that do component repairs, so we have to see how that looks from a commercial perspective, and also safeguard them and their sovereignty as well. We've also looked, do we have satellite divisions abroad, partner with people in the UK, partner with people in Europe or in Asia, and how does that look? But at the moment, I would say as an industry, we're at a pinnacle where a lot of things need to be decided internally, politically, and geopolitically. There's a lot of things that are creating waves within this industry where I feel personally that in 2 or 3 years' time, there's going to be some significant changes where at least the smaller companies for the 2-seater to 12-seater operators are going to find it really difficult if we don't band together and support each other.
And the same as what the other panelists have been saying as well. It's collaboration. It's working together. It's not working against each other like the olden days. It's us working together as stockists, working with the MROs, working with the OEMs and the product OEMs. So let's try and do that.
I agree. Well, yeah, we'll do any questions? Oh, okay.
Thank you. So we did touch on this when we had the MROs earlier, and we also touched on this just now. I've got a fleet of aging aircraft, and getting the parts, as we know, is a bit difficult. It's challenging. What are you guys doing in terms of certifying parts? I know Scott mentioned a little bit, talked about it, and I think Simon too. What are you doing in terms of certifying parts from teardowns? Because I've had situations where I've had my aeroplane with an MRO. They found the parts, but the engineers are happy with it, but they wouldn't install it. So it's something that you guys need to work with the MROs, with the OEMs, and also with the regulators. If operators need to chip in to support this, then we can. But what are you guys doing about it?
Do you want me to go? Hi, Coyote. For European-based aircraft, it's a different world to what it's like in the States, where in the States, is this on? Yeah. Where in the States, you can remove a part from an N-registered aircraft and fit it to another N-registered aircraft if it has been tested. But sadly, in the UK, and certainly Allaero, we can't part out an aircraft and supply an unserviceable unit to someone else in the UK. We have to get everything overhauled, which is a huge cost for us and a huge cost for you, Coyote. But in the America, it's a different story, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a different story for us. So when we tear down an airplane, we tear it down at a Part 145 facility. We ops tech the airplane, and we basically dual release most components off the airplane straight away as a tested, inspected, operationally, functionally acceptable part. But they have key components as well, though, that's not enough. And so on those components, we'll send those out to either another 145 repair station that we've got on the list, or we'll send them back through an OEM one if that's required, because certain parts you just can't get away from it. As removed parts, we do sell some as removed parts. It's a very limited market of people that's interested in that. Basically somebody that's desperate or a small value, small impact kind of a part, they can deal with that. You know, even with us, with a part that goes through a regular repair station versus going back to an OEM repair station, I still run into issues, though, with certain customers that say, well, that teardown report doesn't look the way I'm used to getting a teardown report when I go back to the OEM. Again, it becomes an educational process for us. And then, like Simon said, I may have a part off of a U.S. registered bird, but in whatever country this part is going to, it can't come from there. It has to come from one of their own registered airplanes. I can't help. It baffles me, but I can't do anything about that.
Yeah, listen, I think yeah, hello. I've got one foot in either world here. I sell parts into Europe from aircraft that are parted out in the US, an FA registered MRO and tagged with a dual certificate. Now, the regulations are clear on what you can and cannot accept as a certificate for your aircraft. There's obviously some nuance based on the jurisdiction of registration of your aircraft, but it is clear. And I've had a lot of success selling those parts to various people around Europe. It does come down to the MRO, the quality guy who's going to accept that part and fit it to the aircraft, and the engineer at the end of the day. Now, you could run around every MRO educating people, but at the end of the day, if that guy has a preference, you can't avoid that. And then we're back to the problem of sending that part through an OEM workshop to have it certified. I'm going to just send it I sent a part for a test the other day. They sent me a bill for $58,000 and a load of parts that needed replacing. It came off the aircraft service, right? So it's difficult, Coyote. Yeah, I give you that. But it does come down to speaking to the quality guys, speaking to the engineering guys at the MRO. You're going to take it and say, look, what are the certificate requirements as you understand them for my aircraft? And would you accept this? You know, an example, sir. And I think they can.
Yeah, and I think you're right on that. A lot of it comes down to the owner of that airplane or the operator of that airplane going in specifically saying, this part is qualified, it meets all the requirements, you need to receive it. I mean, we've had it to the point where in certain facilities we've gone into, the day shift inspector receiving won't accept the part, but the night shift one will. There's a problem.
It's my favorite subject, so I like this story about American regulation where you, for example, we bring from Europe or UK aircraft to US, we change the registration. Sometimes it would be cheaper than bring the new parts to Europe, for example, from any point, including this favorite Donald Trump issue and so on. But okay, we take the parts from unregistered aircraft and put it to this to a newly brought aircraft. But then with this aircraft, we cannot come back to Europe and re-register it in EASA because EASA would not accept that there are parts without Form 1 or whatever. So that's very interesting issue, and it's very much connected to the aging aircrafts. And if you just keep in mind that, let's say, general history of the modern private jets aviation starting like 10 years ago or even less after all these complicated rules introduced. So that's definitely a subject for next maybe conference on just on the spares. Spares in Europe, UK, and US. And if you would have guys from the academies, Part 147, then probably they would raise another issues about connection to Form 1, let's say, issued in Japan, Thailand, and some other countries. That's also another issue when more and more aircrafts coming to that part of the world, and the same issue with the spares, and not only the spares, but the components. But what I see from these big guys, I think only Scott really deep how to create, let's say, values from the garbage.
I'll make a quick comment on that. Again, with one foot in either world here. I wouldn't ever suggest to a customer they fit anything without a Form 1. I think over here in the UK that we've had a big story recently with bogus parts that were making their way into a lot of airlines and through very sophisticated purchasing teams and goods in teams. I don't know what the rules are in America regarding certification, but you're always going to want a Form 1 that says a qualified technician has at least inspected and tested this part before you fit it. When it comes to the way that EASA and CAA and the FAA diverge, I mean, I always say to people, well, if that aircraft with those parts is all right to fly over the UK, why aren't we all right to put those parts in our aircraft then, right? You're going to let that aircraft fly into Farnborough and not question the parts that are on it. They're good enough for that aircraft. You know, they're good enough for anyone, really.
Well, I know we're keeping y'all from lunch. I guess I'm dead. It's time to go. We're keeping you from lunch, but I was just going to say in terms of what Vitaly was mentioning there, in terms of all the way different regulators treat things, I think it comes down to the same thing. The OEMs treat their airplanes different. They have different ideas. The regulators have different ideas. Aviation's always been a fractured industry. Everybody's got the next great idea, and it's the best idea, and they got to protect that from everybody else. I think at some point, Vitaly, what you're going to see is that all the different regulators and OEMs and everything will start moving under some sort of an international, like an SAE standard. And once everything gets onto the same platform of standarding, then you'll get rid of a lot of these variables that are occurring, and there'll still be room for us small guys to work within that standard, but everybody's playing with the same deck of cards instead of having some unique set just for them.
Good, I think we're done.
Thank you. Lunchtime.